that's based on a soil scientist's recommendation that we pay for. So what happens is the cart over here is pressurized with air. There's a big fan. Actually, I'll show you the fan. There's a fan on the back that pressurizes everything right here. And that then seeds out the fertilizer through these tubes and the seed, and it goes all the way through these big hoses and all these little hoses, and eventually gets into the furrows. So this is what we call a precision seeding system, or a precision drill. And we have different settings that we can set each individual opener to the depth that we want. So if you look right here, you can see there's barley seed right here. It's we have a special treatment that we put on to make sure that it doesn't get any soil or seed-borne diseases. And what you do is, if you pull back, the darker dirt, that means there's moisture there, and you can see there's moisture pretty much just a little bit below the surface. It's kind of, you can see it's dusty right here, but you don't have to dig very far, and then you can see the moist dirt, and that's exactly where we want to put the seed. So the seed we like to put in moisture. Barley is roughly about give or take an inch, 1.2 to 1.3 inches is what we're aiming for. And then you can see that's my big old tractor that pulls.
Wow. Okay, so a lot was shared in that very first part of your video around seeding. As we're getting questions in from students across Canada, I have one question. So, Clinton, how important is soil to your whole operation?
Very important. In fact, that is what I would say is not only the lifeblood of our family as a farm family, but also the lifeblood really of civilization. If we don't protect soil and make sure we actually give the soil what it needs to grow a crop, it's not going to grow a crop. So we do a lot with soil scientists to make sure that they give us the recommendation of what that soil and what that crop needs. And each piece of land that we have, I mentioned we have 4,000 football fields of land, so it's quite a bit, but each piece we actually treat different. And now we have new technology that we use called variable rate technology, where every acre that we go across, it actually changes the amount of seed and fertilizer to make sure we're getting the best results from that soil.
Well, it's very much showing how important technology has become to farming, where you're saying that it basically knows every square section of your land
Yes.
and understands what needs to be provided to it so it's healthy. Because
Exactly.
everybody's unique, like people or students, everybody's
Yes.
unique. Soil is very unique too. So you have to make sure you kind of need to know what's happening.
Exactly. And you can just, even when you just drive across the land, you can see there's different hills, there's different valleys, and just the soil structure is slightly different. So we want to make sure we manage it and protect it as best as we can.
Oh, wow. So let's get into a question from a student across Canada. So, a Brandy, the James Valley Middle Years class, would like to know if you zero till. So maybe explain a little bit more about what zero
Sure.
tilling is, and then
Brandy,
answer.
that is an excellent question. In fact, roughly about 98% of the farmers in the province of Saskatchewan use zero or no-till practices. So that big planting system that you saw is actually a zero-till drill. So it just slightly opens up the soil and puts the seed and fertilizer in there. As a result of that, all the straw that you saw from the previous year's production, it stays on top of the soil and it decomposes over time to make more organic matter. So I'm very blessed. My dad decided to change to that system back in 1996. And as a result of that, our soil organic matter is growing. That black soil that you saw is growing as well. And the productivity of the soil is getting better and better. And that was one of the things that science kind of taught us, that was a beneficial practice. And we're finding out more that it's beneficial for the environment as well, because it is a sink. It stores carbon in that soil. so it's better for the environment. And I just saw some new data that looked at Saskatchewan. 95% of all our emissions are actually sunk back into the soil. So we really only emit 5% of our carbon through whether it's fertilizers or diesel engines. And we're really striving to be net zero as we go forward too, or even possibly sinking more carbon in than we actually emit.
Wow, I really like that because it shows what's happening in agriculture in terms of innovations of helping the world.
Exactly.
We emit so much carbon into the air that contributes to climate change and the different evolving issues we're seeing with extreme weather conditions. And the fact that we can do these practices with and protect the soil at the same time for food, we're helping feed the world, but we're also helping to protect the world from things like climate change. I really like
Exactly.
that. What a great question. Thank you for
Yeah.
asking that. Let's go on to another question. So, Miss Thorson's grade 3-4 split class. How many seeders do you have for a farm your size? That's a really good question, too.
That is. And it's kind of hard to tell with that picture, but that planting system, that cedar was 66 feet wide. So on our farm, we only need one to do that. And in fact, we could probably seed a little bit more than the land we have. So typically, one of those planting systems could seed about 5 to maybe, if you pushed it, 6,000 acres. So again, an acre is a football field. So we feel comfortable with our unit that we can actually seed 4,000 acres. Some of the bigger ones, the bigger they get, the more you can do, but that's sized pretty much right for our farm.
I think a great activity is students, you should line up along the hall and see how long 66 feet is and then kind of measure. So I think that's a great activity to investigate.
Good
Now, let's
idea.
one more question.
Sure. Do you only produce grain?
Yes.
Um, Yes. So on our farm, we used to actually have a dairy farm and a cattle ranch, and we used to have eggs as well, chickens that produced eggs. We found that it's just my brother and myself, and my dad does help as well, but he's 78 years old. So we found that it was quite a bit of work to try and take care of all the animals that we had, as well as do a proper job on the grain farm with just family labor. So as a result of that, yes, we just produce grains. But grains I will use as kind of a broad term. We produce, we rotate our crops. So we have canola, we have wheat for milling into flour, we have barley that I mentioned, we get to produce beer. We have oats for oatmeal and granola bars. We produce rye. You can ask your teachers what rye gets produced into, and also produce brown mustard. So we have a very diverse group of crops that we grow on our farm for rotation, and it really helps with just taking care of some of the different diseases and some of the pests that we have.
Oh, what a great question, Janelle. And then you mentioned rotation, and that kind of helps with pests. Does it help with anything else and what that means and how do you time rotation? Does it happen every couple of years? Is it dependent on the crop?
So every year on that piece of land, we will grow a different crop. So we would never grow, say, barley on barley or canola on canola. We always rotate that crop. So that's what a crop rotation is. It's making sure that you're growing a different type of crop on that land each year. Now, it's beneficial because it doesn't produce resistance then for, say, diseases or pests, whether it's insects or weeds that kind of come into your crop. The other beneficial thing that we do, and I never mentioned it, we also grow peas, yellow peas on our farm. And these different root structures actually go different depths, and it helps kind of draw nutrients and moisture from different levels. So it's beneficial to have different root structures as well to, again, or I guess variability, not variability, just a variety in the soil as well, and beneficial for the long run.
Well, we're learning so much about soil as we're talking about grain
Yes.
farming. Let's go dive deeper into seeding with the next part of our seeding video.
And inside the tractor, we have numerous different controls, and I'll just give you a look and see what the controls look like inside. It's kind of loud out here, but It's already beeping at me inside. Oh, turn the radio off. But you can see I have numerous different things from my hydraulic controls. So these things, I have different controls to run the pressure of the tank, how fast the tank fan is spinning to give me the pressure I need to get the seeds out. This right here is the monitor to set the pressure on those independent packers. Like I said before, each individual row has its own packer and it's set to an individual depth. Right here is my, this is a blockage monitor. So it tells me if any of my little tubes are plugged up with seed or something else, gook. This is kind of the main system that runs my auto steer. As I mentioned before, the anhydrous actually goes through discs on the front, which I'll just show you in a bit. This is my monitor to show how much I'm seeding. And this will actually automatically turn on and turn off. If I'm overlapping for any reason, it automatically shuts off. And I can set how many pounds of nitrogen I want as per the soil scientist's recommendation. And I just want to show you briefly how that works in terms of the anhydrous. It goes into these little discs. So they're fine discs right here, and there's hoses on the back right here where the anhydrous shoots down into the ground. So we try not to lose any nitrogen to the environment to make sure that we use as much nitrogen as possible. Okay, and that's kind of a quick overview of how a seeder works.
It's just so much technology is needed to make this possible, just looking inside the tractor. So as we're waiting for our first question to come up from students, I'm going to give everybody an activity of guessing how many different careers or jobs are needed to make that tractor possible so that Clinton can go around and do what he needs to do to make sure he's able to seed on a yearly basis. So putting that activity out, and then we're going to bring up a question from students across Canada. So for Miss King's class, where do you send the grain after it's harvested?
It's a good question. It really depends on the crop. So for example, there's a big canola crushing plant just outside of Saskatoon that we send majority of our canola to because it gets produced right into canola and then shipped all around the world. But then we also have different things like our oats. Our oats goes, some of it goes to grain millers in Yorkton. As a result of that, it gets cleaned and milled a little bit, and it goes directly into things like granola bars that you would see in the grocery store. So it just depends, excuse me, on what the crops are, but there's many different choices in our area on where we can sell our grain, which gives a lot more options to farmers.
That's a great question. So you really have to know when you're choosing your crop for the year where it's going, like
Exactly.
keeping that in mind in the process. So I see this one question. I'll ask it just because it's a very interesting question, and then we'll proceed to our commercial break. Is Ziana asked, I'm just monitoring the comments, is how do you know what all the buttons mean, Clinton, in your tractor?
It's sometimes trial and error, and to be honest, when I get back in after a season of not being in that tractor, sometimes it's a little confusing and I have to do some trial runs. But luckily on a lot of these, it's like an iPad or a tablet. There's usually a little help button that you can just kind of tap and it'll tell you what those buttons do. So it is very user friendly. And I can tell you, if you're comfortable running an iPad or a tablet, you'd be comfortable with a lot of those things in that tractor too.
Yes, that was really a great question because it's a question I kind of wonder too.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it can look a little overwhelming,
Yes.
but really it's good to know that there's such help and support, and they try to make sure it's user friendly for everyone
Yes.
to use. So let's go into our commercial break, which is our brain break, and then when we're back, we'll be listening, we'll seeing some more videos with Clinton and getting some more questions answered from across Canada. So we'll be back. So we are back with Clinton, who's going to be sharing more with us about his farm operation. And our next video is on the topic of spraying. So let's get started.
Hi everyone, it's Clinton Monchuk again, and I just want to talk a little bit about spraying things like herbicides or fungicides or insecticides. So in a perfect world, our crops would be planted and only these things would grow instead of these things. These are weeds. Well, weeds take all the nutrients away from the plant that we want. So in this case, there's barley in the field. So we don't want that. We want to make sure that it's only barley growing out here. And you can see this is one small field. It's about 110 acres, 110 football fields. So you can imagine if we had to pick this all by hand, my back would be even more sore than it is already. So we have to use herbicides to spray them. And my brother's just coming in with the sprayer in a bit. I'm the water boy today. So we have the two big tanks of water and the herbicide on there and the pumps and everything ready to go. And what he's going to do is when he comes in here, he's going to open it up. He still has a little bit of herbicide left in the tank, and he's going to go through this, and it's going to selectively just kill out the weeds. So this is an example, and there's blue. We're going to take care of these dandelions, and we're going to leave the barley. Again, barley makes beer, so we want to make sure it's healthy barley. And not only that, the weeds are going to rob the nutrients from that barley. So we want to make sure we grow thick, healthy barley and stuff that's ready to harvest come August or September. So that's really why we spray the herbicides and make sure that we have clean fields. So here comes my brother right now, right around the corner by those trees, making sure he stays in the field. And you can see as he comes closer the pulsation of the sprayer that's meant to push down the herbicide and make sure that it's more effective. Puppies, stay here.
So it's always good to really understand why herbicides are so important. It helps to make sure that you're able to grow a healthy crop. And herbicides are not just sprayed willy-nilly. It's very much thought out. It's keeping the crop and the soil in mind. So that was a great video. Now, I wanted to bring up with everyone that we have some great answers to my question I asked before. How many jobs or careers do we think are involved in making these important pieces of technology? And so we have guesses of 10, 2, 8 or 9, 100, 35, 4. And what I'll say is there's so many careers involved in just making a seeding machine, a tractor, anything that you need to make farming possible. So if anybody's interested in coding, is interested to be an engineer, a technician, electrician, understanding how gas and diesel function to make sure the system's able to run. All those are important. So I think it's a great thing to even think about how we work together with farmers with so many different careers to make these things possible. What do you think about that, Clinton?
100%. There's so many different jobs that go into, and I think a lot of people don't realize the technology and the science that goes into farming nowadays. And there are so many jobs available in the research, the development, like you mentioned, the engineering, and the computers. It's become, you saw the inside of the tractor, it's like a big computer now. So I really would encourage a lot of the students to consider agriculture as a career when they get done their schooling.
Yeah. So thanks for all those great guesses. And now we'll bring up a question from students across Canada. So Miss Thorson's grade 3-4 split class, how do you protect yourself from the spray? Is it safe for humans?
That's a really good question. So as I mentioned with that, we were spraying a herbicide. So a herbicide means it's focused on plants and the structure of plants and the cellular basis of the plants. So it actually doesn't affect humans. That being said, we do take precautions when we put it in the sprayer. So we'll wear gloves, we'll wear different suits, we'll make sure we wash our hands or our faces after we're done, just in case there is anything that splashed up. But we try to do as much as possible to reduce that risk between. That being said, once that herbicide goes on, its specific purpose is for the plants. Now, if we were spraying an insecticide, that would be a little bit of a different story. We would have to take some higher precautions, including making sure that nobody walks in that field for about 48 hours after it's sprayed, and making sure we have more precautions, including a respirator when we put it into the tank. The only thing with insecticides is we don't really use them very often. So in the last 5 or 6 years, I think we've used insecticides twice and on 2 different fields. So we try to use that as low as possible. The other thing is the Canadian Food Inspection Agency and Health Canada actually regulate that to make sure it is actually safe for the workers who use it and the environment that it gets sprayed in.
That is a great question, because it's always good to know the difference between all of them, as well as the health precautions that are taken into mind. So now let's move on to our final video for timing purposes. So this one's on the topic of harvesting.
So because we're combining, I figured just a brief overview on what a combine actually does. You can see the grain is going into the tank behind me right now. We are straight cutting barley. So the barley is standing, and this header right here cuts the barley with a very, very fast moving cutter bar, and it goes on canvases that ended up kind of sucking it to the center here, and it goes down the feeder. So the feeder takes it, bunches it all together, puts it in there, and then it builds it up to a row. The rotor on this combine, and some combines are different, but the rotor on this ends up spinning around and around and around really, really, really fast, and that separates the seed from the straw, and then the seeds are kept and cleaned and put into the back hopper right there, and the straw gets, and you can see it's kind of dusty out there, gets pushed out with a fan and spread around and used to decompose on top of the soil for organic matter for the future. So we're kind of recycling a good portion of what we grow to be more environmentally friendly, and really we're just taking the seeds out when we're combining. So the other thing just to make is kind of the brains of the operation, which is the monitors in here that do everything from auto steer to take yield data, and we kind of store that away and use it for making better business decisions later on. So that's kind of the nuts and bolts of a combine, and then the grain from here ends up going into a grain cart, which I'll show you a video right away about a grain cart, how that works, and then gets stored in grain bins. So as mentioned, we have the grain cart operator comes by, and we don't have GPS and auto steer on the tractor that runs it. So as a result of that, we have to stop when we're unloading. So you can see my rear view mirror, he's just coming up right now. My dad already put one load into the grain cart, and the trucks are over there. So the 2 triaxle semis and trailers, and they will take it, put it into a grain bin, and eventually go out. So here's Andrew's father-in-law, and then all the grain from behind me gets augered out and gets put into that grain cart. So you can see right there, nice golden looking grain coming down, and that will go eventually into a brewing company to get made into beer.
Well, it's so great to learn about the harvesting process. I really liked how you talked about recycling, how it gets recycled back into the earth, and how much you prioritize the soil. So as we're coming to the end of our tour, let's do one more question from a student across Canada. So Ernie Sutter would like to know what your favorite job on the farm is.
Really, I love running the combine. To me, that's the whole year's hard work that ends up hopefully paying off if Mother Nature kind of provides decent weather for us. And the last few years on our farm, it's been pretty good. So that's kind of like my payday, right? So if it was good and we have good weather, then I can afford to farm another year. So, and we want to keep on doing that as many years as we can until somebody else takes over. So I really enjoy harvesting and the harvest season. There's also, Ernie, just a little bit of a unique smell in the prairies during harvest. And it's a kind of a mix between the fall season and the dust in the air. And it just, I don't know. I've always said if I had one more day on the earth, that's where I wanted to be. So in the harvest season with my family and the combine.
I think it just empowers all of us to maybe take a trip out to Saskatchewan during harvest season.
We would
So
we would gracefully have you out in Saskatchewan. We'd love it.
Clinton, it is wonderful to have the opportunity to dive into grain farming with you. Are there any
Yeah.
final words you'd like to share with everyone from across Canada?
I think just to say, if you do have any other questions about farming, feel free to look me up and give me an email. Like I mentioned, Farm and Food Care Saskatchewan or Canadian Food Focus, you can find me as well. There's lots of great resources from agriculture in the classroom, and I really support all the work that they do, and hopefully some of the teachers, if you're looking for different resources, look to them for things about agriculture. So thank you very much for taking an interest in agriculture, and I hope one day to see some of you in my own profession here in agriculture.
Oh, thank you, Clinton, again. I learned something new today. I'm sure everyone else did. Before we close off this episode, and thank you again patiently for waiting, I'm excited to share the mystery word for your student activity books is farms or fermes en français. So this is a great word for Clinton's because he's talking about his green farm. Thank you again for joining us on this episode of the Great Canadian Farm Tour. Our next stop will be on November 4th at 12 p.m. Eastern Time at a turkey farm in Alberta. So that's going to be great. So goodbye for now, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.